They're coming to get you, Barbara. Night of the Living Dead is the start of what's probably the most popular zombie movie franchise ever made. The series has 3 core movies: Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and Day of the Dead. Those are the 3 I watched, and you can expect reviews of the other 2 in upcoming weeks. In later years, another 3 sequels were created, called Land of the Dead, Diary of the Dead, and Survival of the Dead. In addition, Dawn of the Dead had sort of a spin-off series called Zombie, not to mention remakes. But for the purposes of my reviews, the only 3 that exist are that initial trilogy. The man behind all 3 of these movies is George Romero, who died in July of 2017. His death is what motivated me to watch these movies. Plus, I'll watch anything with an oxymoron in the title. So, let's get into it, starting with Night of the Living Dead. The movie starts with brother and sister John and Barbara arriving at their father's grave. John starts teasing Barbara about how she's scared to be in a cemetery. Basically the exact same thing as the Thriller video. It's also where this line came from.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I had heard the line a long time before I saw this movie and always thought it was in a serious situation, but as it turns out, he says it jokingly.
They're coming for you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're acting like a child!
They're coming for you.
I suppose it got popular because when taken out of context, it does represent this movie perfectly. Her name was Barbara and they were coming to get her, and the way he says it fits in with the movie's tone. So at the cemetery, the zombie guy attacks them, John dies, Barbara gets away and finds her way to a farmhouse. She meets up with another guy who was also running from the zombies. He boards the 2 up in the house, and it turns out there were other non-zombie people hiding in the cellar. We now have 7 people trapped in a house surrounded by zombies. It's a variety of people. We have Barbara, the man she first met, a young couple, and a family of 3, whose daughter is very sick. We get to see how people of different backgrounds and different values respond to this life-threatening situation. Take Barbara. She's recently witnessed her brother be murdered. She's gone into shock and seems almost robotic. The single man that she first met up with has little to lose and is therefore the bravest, taking a leadership role. The young couple are depicted as being sort of naive and inexperienced. They have mainly each other to worry about. And the father has his family's welfare at the front of his mind, and is afraid to take any risks or do anything that will put him in danger. All these people are under one roof, with different motivations, but forced to work toward a common goal of simply staying alive. They've all been thrown into this situation and have to make choices, and for most of these choices, there's no clear answer. It makes the viewer consider what would be best. Take this one. They're trapped in a boarded up house that also has a cellar in which they could lock themselves. The choice has to be made. Should they stay in the main part of the house or go in the cellar? The threat is that the zombies could break their way in, and if that's the case, they could possibly fight their way out if they're in the main part. The cellar offers another layer of protection in that case, but then there's no getting out.
The cellar. The cellar, there's only one door, right? Just one door, that's all we have to protect.
We can make it to the cellar if we have to.
If you box yourself in the cellar and those things get in the house, you've had it. At least up here you have a fighting chance.
As a viewer, I found myself weighing the benefits of each and considering what might be best for each character. Barbara's in shock. She can't fight her way through the zombies, nor could the sick child. Maybe they should stay in the cellar, but they shouldn't be alone. Maybe the father should go with them to care for his daughter. These were just some of the thoughts going through my head at the time. I found myself really engaged in their situation and genuinely trying to help these people from a fictional movie that's almost 50 years old. They have a radio and a television in the house that they use to pick up news feeds and learn about the situation. It's interesting because we're learning about the situation as they are. My issue here is that we hear quite a bit about the situation without learning much. There's minutes spent on hearing these reports, and we really only learn 3 things. One is that when people die, they quickly come back to life as a zombie, due to radiation in the air, I suppose. So if someone dies, the public is instructed to forego a funeral and burn them on the spot. 2 is that there's some areas the public is instructed to go to that provide food and shelter from the zombies. And 3 is completely worthless to me. They tell us how to kill a zombie. How do you think you kill a zombie? Whatever you said, you're probably right.
If you had a gun, shoot him in the head. That's a sure way to kill him. If you don't, get yourself a club or a torch. Beat him or burn him. They go up pretty easy.
It's the exact same way you kill a human. I don't know why they spent so much time telling us this one. But it is important that we all learn the location to go for safety. And it poses more questions on what they should do. Should they stay in the house, or should they try to make their way to this safe place? They think it's about 17 miles away. They have a truck outside, but it needs gas, which is on the other side of the house. It's a new set of hard choices to be made, and as a viewer, you're sitting right there with them, considering what to do. At this point in the movie, there's only about 20 or so minutes remaining, and I don't want to reveal too much about how it ends. But I will say we've had a dying child this entire time, and we've known that people tend to turn into zombies after they die. I think most people watching this saw this one coming. And I'll also say that people do die in unpredictable and ironic ways. There were 2 obvious ways to wrap up this movie. They get to the safe place or are eaten by zombies. But I respect this movie for not using either one of these endings. There's a lot to be gained from watching this movie, but there are a few things that I felt could have been improved upon. I know what you're saying. Who is this guy to say he can improve upon George Romero's classic? Well, you're right, but I'm doing it anyway. Number 1 is speed it up. I realize it's almost 50 years old and from a time where everything was a little slower paced, but this felt like it was slow even for its time. The zombie chase in the beginning was drawn out and led to her looking around a house for a while, which soon went to long scenes of this guy nailing boards across the windows. As I said before, the newscast lasted much longer than they needed to. At most moments, it had the feeling like the movie wasn't initially long enough and they were doing anything they could to make it longer. The movie is only 97 minutes long, but it feels much longer. I honestly think this story could have been compressed to 60 minutes, and it would have been more enjoyable for me. 2 is we need some better zombies. This is something that got so much better with the sequels, probably because of the budget. I realize the mood is created through the story and the writing, but it could also be created visually. In my eyes, the scarier the zombies, the better. Of course, to the limit that they're still believable. Are you startled by looking at this guy? 'Cause I wasn't. I think he was probably scary for the time, and we're all just desensitized today, but I can only see it through my desensitized eyes, and with those eyes, it was unimpressive. Also, the consistency of the zombies stood out to me. Throughout all 3 movies, they're very slow and brainless. They barely move, and they don't know how to use tools or guns or anything really. But for some reason, this zombie was quick enough to create an entire chase scene, and even smart enough to grab a brick and break through the car window. A similar thing happens toward the end of the movie, but it was after hours of surrounding the house not knowing what to do. I suppose they finally figured it out. Really, that part seemed out of place to me as well, but at least we could try to justify it. The first zombie had no excuse. Number 3 is subtlety. I know this conflicts a little bit with number 2, and that's because the zombies were very subtle, but nothing else was. The music and the sounds were way over the top. Ideally, the music shouldn't be noticed. It should add to the scene you're watching without being noticed. Here I felt it was very noticed without adding to the scene. It was loud and overpowering and seemed like it was trying to create a scary mood, but just wasn't doing it for me. Everything about these scenes in the movie felt like it was trying too hard to scare me, and the fact that I could see the effort made it impossible to scare me. But even considering all this, I'd say it was a good movie. If you're a very patient person, go watch it. Don't even give it a second thought. If you're sort of patient, just know the first 40 minutes could be a little tough to sit through, but there is a payoff if you do it. And if you're not patient at all, either don't watch it or skip to that 40-minute mark. It'll have a little less of a payoff, but if you watched this review, you already know enough to follow everything from that point. Rotten Tomatoes has this at 96%, and I can understand why. It doesn't hold up very well, but I could see how this would have been amazing in 1968. It was in the middle ground between the silly horror movies before it and the slightly less silly horror movies that came after it. It helped make that transition. If you're a big fan of horror movies, I don't care what your patience level is, you should go see this movie because it'll help you better understand and respect the entire genre. Stay tuned for my review of the sequel, Dawn of the Dead. But first, let me know in the comments any thoughts you have on this movie. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.